Are you ready and excited for the first ever Project Motor Racing gameplay? We certainly are, and we recently traveled to Switzerland to take part in an event there. Publisher giants and developer Straight 4 Studios invited us to a hands-on physics session, and Yannick and I were there to put our top-notch sim racing skills to the test. We're really excited about this sim title coming to PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X this fall. If all goes well, it could feel like GTR and Project Cars are having a baby. It certainly has that vibe, and many of you are hopeful. Today we can tell you much more about the scope, cars, racing classes and game modes of PMR. We even got to talk to the lead developer and the vehicle physics programmer, as well as meet a Formula 1 legend and Le Mans winner from '91. So, off to Switzerland. Welcome back to Overtake, I'm Michel, and the Swiss-based publisher Giants organized a huge sim racing media and creator school trip to the Racing Unleashed lounge at the airport in Zurich. At the beginning we were shown the trailer that went live today. We see Ben Collins in a beefy sim rig with triples and belt tensioner, virtually reliving the golden age of motorsports. At the end we see the title car, the Lamborghini SC63 LMDH, which we unfortunately did not get to drive yet on this day. And then there is Derek Bell, who gives us a preview of what we'll experience in Project Motor Racing.
The answer is about competition, passion, compulsion. That's all you're going to get. Sorry.
We have learned that at release there will be over 70 cars in 10 racing classes on 27 scanned track layouts. The Giants 10 game engine is set to be mod-friendly. A single-player career is planned, as well as online racing modes. Even 4-class races will be possible. All this with 24-hour day-night cycle with dynamic weather. The classes include LMDH hypercars, current GT3s, and go all the way back to 1970s sports cars. The trailer also hints at the BPR Global GT series from the 90s. It all sounds pretty awesome at first. Yannick was really excited about all the old school motorsport flair. If you want to see a special about the historic racing classes soon, let us know with a like and a sub. Then it was time to jump into the rigs.
First ever hands-on with Project Motor Racing, so let's see. Setup, we have Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2 at Canadian Tires Motorsport Park, short Mosport. ICM in-car menu, where we can probably also switch, like for the pit stop, we can set up tire compound and all that stuff, and then also change the car electronics probably. You can also see now we have TC3, ABS3, and also a brake bias is already possible to change. And the car has a tank of fuel, so that means the car is now way heavier. And we probably also have to warm up the tires, but we can see all the electronics are already working here in the car's dash. So we see values are getting green. So we were probably leaving the pits with some tire warmers on because the tires are not stone cold.
First, what I liked. The Mosport circuit has noticeable changes from different asphalt areas, and the basic tire model allows you to work with the contact patch of the tire without immediately losing grip when you overdrive the car a little, so you can deliberately push it a little until it starts to understeer. In some corners, however, the rear of our Huracan GT3 suddenly overtook us, as if there were no more downforce on the rear axle or the TC just quit its job. That was a bit strange.
That's a complicated one, like you have to go to the outside to really get a good exit here. As you can see already in my second lap, I quite get an understanding of what the car does. That's a good sign for the physics, that they seem to have a logical communication. Also visually, what the car does, how it moves, and also how the force feedback translates that.
So the fundamentals are right, but many details felt flat. The ABS braking, the feel of the TC in general, and the curbs didn't feel modeled yet. There is still some work to be done before the fall. Let's ask Ben Ponsford about this. He is basically in charge of the vehicle's physics.
What we felt was in the Lamborghini, especially because this was a car that also featured TC and ABS, we felt that under braking the car was a bit flat. There's still an area that you are looking into? Or?
I think both of the implementations we've got, like for the ABS and TC memory, there is scope to improve them. We don't think they're bad at the moment. They're adjustable to any number of levels you want. So some cars just have traction control on or off. Other cars, more modern cars, will have like maybe 10 settings, for example. So we've set up like what's a minimum level of traction control, what's a maximum level, and then you just divide that up into as many steps as you want, as suits the car. So we've got all that adjustability there. It works. But we do have ideas on how we can make it slightly more detailed, more realistic. Tie it into the engine and braking systems maybe even more closely than it is, to maybe get some more nuanced behavior out of it, maybe more adjustability.
What areas of the physics need the most development until the release in fall? What would you say?
From here, we're finishing off hybrid tech, but the hybrid stuff is all new, so we've had to really start at the basics. So it's just I've heard of an electric motor, but I need to know a lot more so I can build one of these things so it can be configurable, and you've got to be able to replenish the battery, and it affects the braking, and all these things tie together. Bug fixes and optimization is kind of the next phase where we're going to. We're at a point where the game is largely complete, which is why we're willing to bring you all here and do this demo. Obviously we've turned off a lot from the build. We've not shown you everything. We wanted to keep it nice and straightforward. We've not shown you weather. We're not showing you game modes. We've not shown you what. You're not seeing any AI or multiplayer. There's a load of stuff there we're not showing off today.
To be honest, I was a bit surprised to hear Ben say that what was shown was already close to being final. If that's true, Project Motor Racing is very far from the current benchmark, Le Mans Ultimate, where working with ABS and TC in the LM GT3s feel very alive and sensational. And I'm not only talking about the force feedback here. In this respect, I remain somewhat skeptical when it comes to the in-depth, detailed implementation of every car's systems. But the good news is, it doesn't feel arcadey or easy at all. Without an understanding of realistic driving dynamics and sim racing experience, you won't get very far. Of course, there will also be driving aids for beginners and a good controller experience, as the console is a big topic for this title. What Ben told us is that the underlying physics are designed with a realistic approach and therefore use of a steering wheel. Gamepad handling will therefore use the same physics, but with an algorithm to anticipate inputs and translate them to the steering without enabling unrealistic movements or advantages. So it's a clear wheel-first title, but we hope it will also feel good on a gamepad.
What's your take on frequencies, effects? Is there anything special that Project Motor Racing is looking at to implement for addressing the steering wheels?
A key thing for us from the start has been we need to minimize latency, because that is something you can never completely get rid of with the steering wheel, but that's a very important thing, because you can feel what the car is doing before you see it on screen. Not even all wheels allow this, but if we can, the main tick of the vehicle physics is at 720 hertz, so we collect telemetry from the car at 720 hertz, and we can send that to the wheel drivers to say, please update the force feedback with all the repositioning. So surprisingly, some of the drivers actually don't allow us to do 720 hertz in terms of communicating for the wheel. We might have to half it, but other ones do.
Okay, this is very interesting. Some steering wheels will give us 720 hertz physics in Project Motor Racing. We remember the tests with Marcel Offermann's last garage demo, which ran at 1000 hertz and gave very fine force feedback on the track surfaces. There is still a lot to discover in this area, and we will look into it closer to the release of PMR. R-Factor 2 or even LMU or ACC run at 400 Hz as far as I know. It would be great to see another big step forward this year. Then there was an interesting community question regarding the single-player experience.
Many simulators or racing games, the AI uses a different physics model than the player. Is that also the case in PMR, or do they use the actual same physics?
We're definitely using the same basis. The only thing we need to consider is performance. So we push details of this as much as we can to give the best player experience. And we're well aware that there's been issues where I think in some past titles that we've been associated with, the AI have not been as consistent with the player. Someone else was actually asking me in the wet that the AI weren't affected by standing water, I think in some other title. And obviously we definitely don't want to repeat any of the mistakes in the past, whether it's from Slightly Mad or from anybody else. Everyone should be learning from one another. but at the same time, you need to, you want to have a reasonably large field of AI. So there are various things, I can't share specifics, but there are various things you can do to try and make the AI faster. But obviously they need to stay utterly competitive with you. You cannot have an advantage or disadvantage. Those lap times need to come out the same. Like a prime example, we're discussing removing like the steering rack as an example, because with that, we're pretty sure that only affects force feedback. And obviously you don't have force feedback in the loop for AI, so you can cut that out and it doesn't change the performance of the AI at all, and it's one less thing to simulate. So that's an easy win. It is the same physics model. They have to be competitive. We can't compromise on that. So if it comes to it, we would compromise on the AI car count if we had to.
Thanks to Ben for answering all of our questions. Afterwards, we went down to one of the Formula cockpits, where we were allowed to drive the Audi R8 LMP 900 at Lime Rock Park. It is still in alpha, and they are still working on the lighting and other details. In any case, the farming simulator engine offers a very clear visual appearance, and I also find the intense colors quite appealing. What's more important is that you can achieve high frame rates on triples and in VR, and that seems to be straight force priority. The track objects, spectators and vegetation are not necessarily what you would expect from a brand new game in 2025. Racing titles once used to set standards. And that's not the case here. On the other hand, the sound design is very promising, as our third hands-on showed.
But that's the 1970 Lola T70 MK3B GT. Lightweight aluminium monocoque with a bubbling Chevrolet V8. But yeah, let's drive a lap around Mosport as well here in the Lola this time. So we also bumped up the engine sound a bit, so maybe you can hear a bit through the microphone, probably not, but I can tell you that this Chevrolet V8 sounds really, really mechanical and rich. So in terms of the sound aspect of the game, this is very promising, I have to say. So that's just beautiful, and you can feel the volume of the engine, but also the weight and the old tires of the car, because that obviously has also the tire model from the early 70s, and therefore this car is kind of hard to drive. So you have to be really smooth. So this one downhill here a little bit, and you can feel the weight transfer going down that hill, trying to nail or exceeding the tread limits a little bit, and then this blind left-hander that was already challenging in the GT3, but this one even harder to nail that corner. I got exceeded the track limits here also a little bit, and then this long right-hander. And you can hear also the tires squeaking a little bit. So there's also good audible feedback of what your tires are doing. That also helps. So I'm really impressed by the audio aspect of the game by now.
Check out what an F1 legend has to say about the Lola in Project Motor Racing. None other than Johnny Herbert, who won Le Mans 1991 in this car. The whole interview with Johnny is 15 minutes long, by the way. He was so nice. Let us know if you want to see the whole thing uncut, and we'll get it for you.
All right, so I'm here with a familiar face to hopefully a lot of people. None other than Johnny Herbert. Johnny, nice to meet you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I think it's an older generation that probably know the
Probably.
face, unfortunately. So
unless they've seen you on TV a bunch.
They may have seen a bit of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're obviously with Lola, which which have built one of the cars that's available to drive here, the Lola T70 from 1970.
Mark III, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty old school car. But what do you think about the digital recreation of the car here?
Well, it's one of those things. It's very important, even for me. If you're going to drive a sim, you want to drive something that feels like the real thing. And I tell you what, I was quite surprised. It was really good because it's drivable. It sort of it understeers, it oversteers. It's quite difficult to drive, but you can drift the car on the game as well. So yeah, Project Motor Racing has really got the whole essence and feeling of what the T70 and the history of the T70 is all about. So good fun.
Finally, if you've been wondering if there is a way for you guys to test and give feedback before the release of PMR, there is actually something coming up where you can apply the factory driver program.
I'm here with Kevin from Straightforward Studios. Kevin, you have something interesting to show us. What are we looking at here besides a really cool looking command post, basically?
Well, it is a cool command post. This is what we're calling the driver factory program. So like a typical racing team, you need drivers to test. You need to get feedback from real feedback to be able to make real world changes. For us, we don't want to turn around and have an open beta or a beta where we get people to pay and we put out our bugs to the world. What we want to do is we want to invite in real drivers, real sim racers, and people with real opinions to come in and say, hey, this car doesn't handle right, and give the feedback to us before we launch.
Yeah.
So we're going to invite people. There'll be an application process. The time frame is around the end of May that we're looking to do this. So it's kind of like our special closed beta.
So much for our trip and our first impressions of Project Motor Racing. We're cautiously optimistic. This could be a pretty cool release for us sim racers this year. The developers are definitely getting in touch with the community, and the targeted mix of content, the prospect of modding support as well as a console version, VR and native triples on day one is a pretty promising package. However, doing all this with a completely new engine and implementing so many cars in such detail is a mammoth task when you look at the output of AC Evo and Le Mans Ultimate in comparison. Let us know what you would like to see and know in more detail for the next preview. Thanks for watching. Here's also our review from yesterday, the brand new Simagic Alpha Evo Pro. And we'll be back tomorrow with Emily's MotoGP 25 review. Stay tuned for that.